My father stood at the head of the conference room table, looked directly at me, and said, "The company doesn't need you anymore, Margaret. We've decided to give your position to your brother." Effective immediately. 14 people in that room. My whole career. My team. And my brother sitting at the far end of the table, not quite meeting my eyes. I looked at my father for a long moment. Then I looked at my brother. Then I reached into the leather bag beside my chair, placed a single document on the table, and slid it toward my father. He picked it up. He read the first paragraph. The room watched his face change. I said, "Before this meeting goes any further, I think you should know who owns this building. My name is Margaret Cole. I am 44 years old. I have spent 16 years building the operations division of our family's commercial real estate firm from a 2-person team into a department of 31. And the day my father decided to give my position to my brother was the day he remembered, too late, exactly what my name was on. Tell me the city you are watching from right now. Drop it in the comments below. And tell me if you have ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to have your back most. My father started the firm 40 years ago with one office building and a very good instinct for undervalued commercial property. By the time I joined full-time at 28, it had grown to 14 properties across 3 cities. I was not handed a senior role. I asked to start in property operations, learned every system, rebuilt the maintenance and tenant management structure from scratch, and eventually built a team that handled everything from lease negotiations to capital improvement projects. My brother, Connor, had joined the firm 6 years after me. He was charming, well-dressed, and genuinely talented at client relationships and business development. He brought in good accounts. He was an asset. We had always worked well in parallel. Or so I believed. What I didn't know for quite some time was that Connor had spent the previous year having a series of private conversations with our father about restructuring leadership at the firm. The story he told, apparently, was that operations had become too siloed under my management, that I was resistant to new direction, and that the company needed fresh vision at the top. He presented himself as that vision. My father, who was 71 and increasingly deferring to Connor on business decisions, accepted this framing without discussing it with me. The meeting had been called under a different pretext. A quarterly review. 14 staff members, including my entire operations team. I had prepared materials on our Q2 performance, a strong quarter. Our tenant retention rate was at 94%, and we had completed 2 major capital projects under budget. I walked in expecting to present numbers. Instead, I found Connor already seated at the position where I usually sat, and my father standing at the head of the table with an expression I had not seen before. The expression of a man who has rehearsed something and is committed to delivering it regardless of the response. He was brief. The company was evolving. Leadership needed to reflect new priorities. Connor would be assuming oversight of operations effective immediately, in addition to his business development role. My position was being eliminated. There would be a generous transition package. He said all of this to my face, in front of my team, without having said a single word to me privately beforehand. I sat with it for exactly 4 seconds. 4 seconds during which I made a decision I had actually been preparing for, without fully knowing I was preparing for it, for the past 2 years. 2 years earlier, during a period of firm expansion, we had acquired 3 new properties simultaneously. The transactions moved quickly, and my father had asked me to handle the ownership structuring because Connor was traveling and our usual attorney was unavailable. I had worked with an outside legal firm to establish a holding structure that protected the acquisitions during the transition period. The documents were filed correctly. My father had signed them without reading them closely, the way he signed most things I prepared, because he trusted my work. What those documents established, in clean and unambiguous legal language, was that the 3 acquired properties were held under a subsidiary company. That subsidiary company had 2 registered owners, my father and me, not Connor, not the main firm. Me, personally, as an individual owner with a 49% stake in 3 commercial properties collectively valued at approximately $4.2 million. I had flagged this to my father at the time as something we should formally transfer into the main firm's ownership once the transition period was complete. He had said we'd handle it later. Later had never come. The properties remained in the subsidiary. My stake remained intact. I had consulted an attorney 3 months earlier, not because I anticipated this moment, but because I had begun to sense the direction things were moving, and I wanted to understand my position clearly before anything happened. My position, as it turned out, was quite strong. I reached into my bag. I removed a single document, a summary of the subsidiary's ownership structure, 1 page, clean and clear. I slid it to my father without a word. He picked it up. He read the first paragraph. I watched understanding arrive on his face the way weather arrives, gradually and then all at once. Before this meeting goes any further, I said, I think you should know who owns this building, and the one on Meridian, and the Commerce Street property. Connor leaned forward. What is that? That, I said, is the ownership structure you didn't review before this meeting. The room was completely quiet. My operations team, to their credit, kept their expressions carefully neutral. I continued. I own 49% of the subsidiary that holds 3 of the firm's most recently acquired properties. That ownership was established legally, documented fully, and has never been transferred to the main entity. I looked at my father. I flagged this for resolution 2 years ago. It was not resolved. My father set the paper down very slowly. Connor said the document must be outdated. I told him the filing date was visible at the top of the page. He said there must be a legal error. I told him the error, if there was one, had been sitting in the county property records for 2 years. My father looked at me across the conference table with an expression I could not fully read. Something between recognition and regret. I said, I am not here to threaten anyone. I am here because I was invited to a meeting where my career was being ended in front of my own team, without a private conversation, without notice, and without apparent awareness of the legal structure that exists within this firm. I thought the full picture was relevant before any decisions were finalized. The meeting did not go as my father and Connor had planned. What followed over the next several weeks was a formal legal review, a renegotiated ownership agreement that properly transferred the subsidiary properties to the main firm in exchange for a documented equity stake in my name, and a restructuring of the leadership arrangement that preserved Connor's expanded role while also restoring my formal position and authority within operations. My father called me 3 weeks later. He did not apologize for the meeting exactly. He said he had not understood what he was signing 2 years ago. I told him I knew that. I also told him I had flagged it. He said he remembered. There was a long pause, and then he said he thought I had always been the one who actually understood how the business worked. I told him that would have been a useful thing to say before the quarterly review. My team has stayed intact. The operations department is running as it has always run. Connor and I have found a professional equilibrium that works, built on the mutual understanding that neither of us benefits from the other's failure. My father is older. He moves through the office more slowly now. Sometimes I watch him reviewing documents at his desk, and I think about how different things might have gone if he had read more carefully, or asked more questions, or had a private conversation with me before calling that meeting. And then I think about the green leather bag under my chair, and the single piece of paper that changed everything in the space of one quiet morning. And I am grateful that I had always paid attention to the details, even when nobody asked me to. Now I want to hear from you. If you found out you had more leverage than anyone realized, would you use it the way I did? Or would you handle it differently? Tell me in the comments. And tell me the city you are watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has reached. Subscribe before you leave. There are more stories coming that you will not want to miss.